My therapist told me once that some of us heal out loud so that others don't have to. And that's what I think about for people like us, but especially the people that come onto our podcast and just share so much, so vulnerably. Even if it is anonymous, it's still a lot to talk about and put out there. And so, yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, Corey. Like, it gives other people that space.
Hi, and welcome to Family Twist. We're so glad you're here. Today's episode is a little different for a couple reasons. First, we're thrilled to welcome Alexis Auerselt, the creator and host of DNA Surprises, an incredible podcast dedicated to the often complicated emotions that come with DNA discovery. Alexis has created a space for people experiencing DNA surprises to share their stories, process their journeys, and find community. Second, this conversation couldn't be more timely, not just because of what's happening in our country, but also because of breaking news in the DNA world. Just recently, 23andMe announced its bankruptcy filing. For many of us in the DNA discovery and genetic genealogy communities, this raises serious concerns about what happens to personal DNA data, privacy, and the ongoing accessibility of the resources people have come to rely on. It's another layer of uncertainty in a space that is already emotionally complex. In addition to that, we're having this conversation at a time when history itself is under attack. All around the country, efforts to erase or rewrite history are ramping up, making identity discovery journeys like Alexis's even more difficult and more important. We talk with Alexis about all of this, about navigating the personal, the political, and the cultural, and about how podcasting has become a tool for healing, resilience, and community. We're so grateful Alexis joined us for this conversation. Let's get into it. Alexis, welcome to Family Twist.
Thanks so much for having me.
Alexis is the creator and host of DNA Surprises, an awesome podcast. We got to meet in person last spring. Alexis was moderating a panel at the Untangling Your Roots Summit that I was on. And so, yeah, we had a good old time. And you were very, and I loved seeing what your outfit was going to be like each day too. That was a lot of fun.
Same to you. So, honestly, I think
yes, we definitely stood out in a sea of folks. That's fun.
What can I say? I love color.
So just before we get into your story, how has doing your podcast sort of affected your journey, your DNA discovery journey? Because you've been doing it for what, 3-4 years now?
Yeah, three and a half, almost 4 years since I started the podcast. It has helped me immensely. I started the podcast just a few months after my DNA surprise. I felt like I needed some sort of outlet. I'd had a podcast with a friend that we decided to stop doing over the summer, just a few weeks before I got my test results, actually. This happened, and I didn't know what to do with all of the energy and everything that I was processing. And I also just really wanted to talk to other people who had gone through this experience because, I joined the supportive Facebook groups and other online resources, and those have all been amazing. But I really wanted to get to dive into people's stories. And so I put out a call in October of 2021. Hey, will anybody talk to me? And a bunch of people, just trusted me, which I'm so grateful for because they had no idea what I was going to actually do with their stories, and just had these amazing conversations and got it started. And it's been super healing, super validating to just talk to people and realize that the feelings that I was feeling were actually not that unique. This is a relatively common experience. And, I feel like I have made friends and connections that I never would have otherwise made if not for this. So the podcast has been huge in my healing.
I'm so glad you touched on that. I feel exactly the same way about it for myself. The only thing that's surprising for me is that I know a few people, and really well, friends from the past, who already had their DNA surprises and they are, already had their news. And the funny thing to me is that I haven't convinced probably any of them to come on and talk about it. And I was like, do they think that we're going to, we're trying to do, scare journalism? Like, that's not what we're about.
Right.
But what I've come to learn is those people that I think about it, they're really just very, very private people and very probably shy is the way to describe them. And that's what it is. It's not that they haven't dealt with their situations internally. It's just that they don't want to talk about it publicly. So I am not that person. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just, because to your point, I feel like we need this community and we need to be able to reach out to others when we're having a bad day and say, I'm feeling this, and know that the other person can relate. A lot of people don't even have that, don't have supportive spouses or sadly anybody in their lives that they can really talk to. So
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people. And, I wonder if in your case, it's like I have the benefit of providing people with some anonymity. And I'm sure you've seen that with your other guests. They don't know me super well, and they only have to use their first names. And I let them use a pseudonym if they want. There's maybe some level of anonymity. So it doesn't feel as personal as talking to somebody in depth about how this experience has shaped you or affected you.
right. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because these couple of friends that I'm thinking about, they have some really far out stories. So I feel like it would be really interesting for listeners to hear, but we're not there yet.
And there's also just different circumstances that, we want to respect while we don't love family secrets, we do respect people's decision to keep certain things to themselves. Because I'm thinking of the wildest story right now that we could share, which we can't, right? But I think the nice thing about what you do and our approach as well is that this is an outlet for people who don't feel like they have a voice or can't speak up right now, but at least they can hear other people's stories, feel like, okay, I'm not alone. And then maybe they can go on to the social media groups and stuff and be anonymous that way, but just be like part of the community that way. Whereas if we're going to be part of a community, and I think you're the same way, like we're in it. Yeah.
Yes. My therapist told me once that some of us heal out loud so that others don't have to. And that's what I think about for people like us, but especially the people that come onto our podcasts and just share so much, so vulnerably. Even if it is anonymous, it's still a lot to talk about and put out there. And so, yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, Corey. Like it gives other people that space.
Oh, it's been 4 years now since your discovery, and you always have known that you were a person of color, but 4 years ago you discovered that you're African American as well. And so
Yes.
What has that cultural experience been like for you for the last 4 years?
It's been interesting. I think in the beginning, I was so obviously confused, and it's really disturbing to come to terms with the fact that I had been telling people, no, I'm not Black. I'd been asked about it my whole life. Are you biracial? Are you Black? And I was like, no, I'm not. I have my sisters. We look alike. Of course, in hindsight, I'm like, no, you do kind of look a little bit different from them. But I was like, this is just how I turned out. My dad is relatively dark skinned, like he's pretty tan. And so I was able to dismiss it. And it's really a mind F to think about the fact that I had been saying no and denying it, actively denying my actual identity without knowing it, but still doing that. And so, so many people talk about that experience of looking in the mirror and not really even being able to look in the mirror, and just saying to myself over and over again, like every time I would almost like an affirmation, I was like, this is not what a Mexican woman looks like. This is not what a Mexican woman looks like, because it was just this unreal experience. And then I felt frustrated and angry because I did have a hard time identifying with the Mexican side of my family. It never really connected. And I always felt like of my sisters, I was the one that tried the most. Like I was the one that really wanted to learn Spanish. I was the one, who was just much more interested. I mean, the reason I took my test was so that I could explore that side of my heritage more. And then to find out, okay, well, that it was validating, but also frustrating that I tried so hard. And then coming to terms with the fact that I do feel like the African American side of me was that history, that heritage was taken from me. I didn't have the opportunity to grow up with those experiences. Even if other people perceived me a certain way, I never felt like I could claim any of those experiences. I live in Arizona. There's not a large Black community here. And so while I was always sort of drawn to like African American culture, music, clothes, like all of those things, I never felt like I could totally claim it and felt like I was a little bit more of an outsider looking in. And so, since my discovery, I have connected with my biological father and that side of the family. He lives in Alabama, which is a very large Black community. When I first visited him, he took me to the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, which is literally just like a walk through African American history, and just spending time with him, going to family reunions, getting a little bit more connected. And I really felt like I wanted to dive deep at first and learn as much as I could. I think now I've reached this place where I definitely embrace it. I definitely want to keep learning. It does feel a little bit like I will never fully, quote, claim that part of my identity in a way, because it still feels a bit like I'm on the outside of it.
Did your raising family know that you were going to take that test? Or was it?
They didn't.
And really, I mean, you wouldn't feel a need to announce it. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
yeah, you're just
not at all.
just
I mean, I'd been
curious.
told a whole story about where I came from and how my parents met and when I was born. And again, in hindsight, I'm like, that story was so fuzzy. You should have realized something was going on.
Mhm.
But, I'd had it on my wish list. Like, we have shared wish lists among my family.
Oh,
I'd had it on there for years and nobody bought it. But nobody said, hey, we see you're interested in taking this
right.
test, FYI. But I just had it on there. And then finally, when it went on sale, I was like, all right, I'm just going to buy it for myself. And I did, but I did not tell them.
So we're in a really bizarre time, country, and the world.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people in your situation who are finding out that they're a different ethnicity than they thought they were. And now we've got to deal with the fact that our identities are being erased around the country. How is that affecting you?
Oh, that's a great question. December and January are really hard months. Not that they still aren't challenging, but especially January, and kind of when all of the things started rolling out and we started to see people history being actively erased. It was very, I guess this is probably the first time now that I'm reflecting on this. I'm like, I didn't have this perspective the first time that this kind of happened, right? And now I have a different point of view in a sense. I mean, I was always aligned, right? Like I always considered myself an ally and huge promoter of equal rights and social justice. Like those things haven't changed for me. But now it's, oh, that's actually like my history that's
Mhm.
being covered up, in government buildings and things. And so I think it just puts me in a different perspective and it does feel more personal. However, I would say in general for me, it's just as enraging, right? Like it's still deeply upsetting, but I don't have the luxury of not identifying with the group that's being affected probably as much. Although I will say, even on the Mexican side, I mean,
Yeah,
it's still some Mexican Americans might not agree with me, but I would say that Mexican Americans are also being attacked currently.
for
So,
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're frightened. We don't know where things are going, and where they've been going the last, few months is really scary. But I was thinking about this yesterday, and not that we want to completely turn this episode into that, but I was just thinking, okay, when you hear about these things happening, things being erased, taken off websites, taken out of museums and stuff, I'm like, this is just a bump in the road. This is a handful of people who are horribly racist, but I have faith that there are way more of us who are going to continue to speak out and make sure that things get back to where they should be. So,
I certainly hope so. I think I'm trying to view it as cyclical, and that the tides will turn. And I think as long as, we keep being vocal and supporting each other, we'll get through.
Yeah, I work for a company that thankfully has, at least internally, kind of said, we're not changing our DEI initiatives. We want to support you, and that as an out gay man in the company, that means a lot to me. I feel like if they hadn't done that, I might have already been job searching. You know what I mean? If they hadn't done the right thing. I feel like now, whenever President Orange gets out of the way, we're going to need DEI initiatives more. We're going to need to double up. It's just
Yeah.
to prove our point that we can't be forgotten.
Right.
Right.
To tie these two topics together, and I think this is happening all over the country. Kendall's half-sister on his mother's side, the older one, they are just like peas in a pod. And it's just been so amazing to see this relationship bloom. And for, several years ago, she would have considered herself a conservative, but she is totally flipped. And she's out there doing the stuff, sending the postcards, getting out there. She's having us come to a rally next weekend with her.
Yep.
So,
That's awesome.
so that's heartening because that's also part of this story. Like maybe this relationship with Kendall has helped open her eyes to stuff that was, that she didn't know was happening, and how it was affecting people,
Mm-hmm. I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I hope, I don't preach to her, but I think she sees our message, and our goals.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's open-minded. I just think sometimes who you surround yourself with, right? It can be difficult.
Yeah, I will say, going back to your original question, Corey, one thing that has really helped me during this time is the fact that I have a connection with my biological father, because he and I are very closely aligned as far as ideology goes. And so, he's somebody that I can talk to. I can't, unfortunately, talk to my raised parents about a lot of this stuff, but I can talk to him. And so having him as somebody who's, okay, you understand, I'm not crazy here, has been so honestly like healing for me to realize, okay, there's somebody here that I can talk to and who gets it. So yeah, I agree. Like, that's beautiful, Kendall, that your relationship with your sister has helped her. And I would say I've experienced the same, maybe in a different way, but similarly.
So we were refreshing ourselves with your story this morning and reading an article, like a Q&A that you did a couple of years ago. But I think at that point you had not connected with your birth father's side of the family. So can you talk a little bit about what that was like, that first contact?
Yeah. So we actually did connect within a week. I talked to multiple people, and I'm very lucky. My best friend is a therapist, and not my therapist, but a therapist. And so she kind of has that lens sometimes, I think, when she's advising me. She told me, when I told her everything, she goes, okay, this is the only unsolicited advice I'm going to give you here, but I would say wait to reach out to them until you are okay with whatever outcome, meaning they could accept me. They could say, I have no idea who you are. Go kick rocks, right? Which is what we hear sometimes from people in our community. And I knew that I was not in a place to be rejected because I was already feeling super disconnected from my parents. And so I was like, I'm going to wait. Before I could even wait. So I found out on a Thursday, and then on a Monday, I got a message on Facebook from my sister, my half-sister.
Wow.
I did not match with her. I actually matched with my biological father directly, as well as a brother. And so the brother is the one who saw the results, took that to his sister. Like, I think we might have another sister.
Wow.
And then she, like me in normal situations, was too impatient to wait and reached out to me on Monday.
Yep.
Yes.
That's me.
And yeah, it took a lot. But having that perspective of wait until you're sure that you're okay with whatever helped me slow down. So she reached out to me on Monday. We had a 45-minute call, kind of confirmed, yes, your dad is my dad. Now I know who it is. And then she told him, hey, you might want to check your ancestry. And there's an Alexis that came up on there. And he's, Alexis who? You have a cousin named Alexis. That's probably who it is. And she's, I really think you need to log on. And so he did. He sent me a message right away, gave me his phone number. I called him. We talked. It was a little bit awkward, but not as awkward as you might think, given the circumstances. After that, we talked very, very regularly, like that, that initial where you're talking multiple times a week and learning about each other. And then in November, I went, and so this was in July. And then in November, I went and visited Montgomery. And so I got to meet my brother, sister, and my father. And that was awesome. That's when he took me to the museum and we had that whole experience. And then just a couple months later, or a month later in December, I went to my sister's wedding. She invited me. And then the following March, they came out to visit me. And then that summer, we went to a family reunion. So they've really just embraced me with open arms. And that has been incredible.
Did your father even think that you could have existed?
Not even a hint. I mean,
Wow.
I don't know for sure exactly what happened, but I suspect it was probably like a one-night stand kind of thing, in their 20s, military, they're in Spain. I mean, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Live your life. But he had no idea. I would suspect that they didn't hang out or anything.
Right.
So he would have had no idea. He went on to continue in the military. He met his wife, and that's when he had my sister and brother. So he's just, had no idea. Complete surprise.
Why had he and your brother taken the ancestry test?
So I'm not sure what my brother did, but I know he took it because he had an interest in genealogy, and there was also an adoption in his family tree. And so he's trying to kind of fill in some gaps and learn more about his family.
I think you touched on something really important in that, yes, not everybody has the great happy ending that you have, but it's not always a happy ending. I mean, it's not a happy ending for anybody because, you continue to process this for the rest of your life.
Right.
Same with Kendall. And we've had our ups and downs, but I would say the positives certainly outweigh the negatives. I wouldn't take back doing ancestry.
Never.
I might take back doing 23andMe now that they're... and anyway, we're getting our DNA taken down from their site.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
I still haven't decided what I'm going to do about that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Part of me is, initially I was like, let me remove everything. I'm reading a little bit more about the terms of service, but then I'm also like, given our earlier conversation, not really trusting any institutions right now. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't yet, but I'm thinking about it.
And I did mine just because I was interested in, the genealogy side of things. Both my grandfather and my uncle on my dad's side were very, very interested in family history. But then also, it was always been in the back of my mind. My father was a Rolling Stone, let's say. And, he laid his hat in a few homes.
Yeah.
So, there might be a surprise out there for us. I mean, there was a story that came up that my mom told that I'd never heard like last year. And it's just, okay. So, so now I might have to do ancestry.
Well, has your perspective changed at all on if you do have a random sibling pop up?
I would love it. It sounds like I'm not satisfied with having 6 have siblings. I am, but one of my father's other 2 sons and I joke with our dad and say, we really could have some others, couldn't we, Dad? And he's like, yeah, who knows? So it's kind of, so I mean,
so funny.
But, I would love it.
You would love it?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I've always been looking for that big sister role because I'm the oldest of 3. And I found that professionally in friendships and stuff. But to have a big sister pop up, as long as she wasn't a lunatic, I would be thrilled. Yeah. And I think my brother and sister would eventually embrace it too. It'd probably be very difficult for my mom, but I think she'd have a better understanding of the whole idea of it, just be going through this experience with Kendall's journey.
I always have a lot of empathy for the siblings that they're learning something about their parents, right? Like when they have these results pop up. Not always, right? But in those cases where maybe there were affairs or, anything like that. And sometimes they think, oh, my dad would never do that, or my mom would never do that. And so I have a lot of empathy for them. But I think now when I talk to people, I'm always curious. If this happened to you now, would your perspective be different than that initial maybe defensive
right
posture?
How do your raising parents feel about you having this relationship with your birth side of the family?
They are supportive. I mean, there was nothing they could do to stop it. So they didn't really have a choice. When my biological father and sister came out to visit in spring a couple of years ago, I extended the opportunity to my parents to meet them. And I very much put it out there. You do not have to. This is no pressure, but just so you know, they're coming and we're going to do like a barbecue. They ended up meeting him at my son's football game first. Later that weekend, everybody got together at my house. So my mother-in-law, my husband's mom, my biological father, sister, both of my younger sisters, and my raised parents all came over. And my daughter, who was, I want to say 5 at the time, maybe 4, she said, "Can we all get a picture?"
Yeah,
And so I have a picture of all of us
that's
together,
cool.
me standing between my parents, my biological parents, and then my dad is just standing next to my mom. And I'm so grateful for that
Yeah,
because I'm like, I don't know if I will ever have the opportunity to have them all
yeah.
together like that. And yeah, so I'm super grateful to my parents. They have been very more supportive than they needed to be, really, given the situation.
Well, you made me think of something that is always tear jerking for me still to this day. One of my favorite photographs that we'll ever have is we had moved, listeners probably will already know, but we moved from San Francisco to New England to be near my father and 2 of his other 3 children. And so my brother Chris, we were living 12 miles from him at the time that this happened. So he and his family came over to meet my mother's daughter, and having the photograph of me standing between my mother's daughter and my father's son, it just makes you feel accepted on both sides. It was a cool, amazing moment, and I'll never forget it. And the fact that my brother posted that picture and said, Kendall with 2 of his siblings, that had never been said about me before. So
Yeah.
having been raised an only child, it all felt kind of surreal and overwhelming, but we loved it. It was just a whole fun experience.
Absolutely. I'll never forget that first weekend. It's stamped in my brain, like all the details and stuff. It's just incredible.
I mean, and I'm sure, Kendall, as an adoptee, you relate to this, not necessarily having a photo of yourself with both of your parents, right? And like that's not something. And this whole experience has given me so much empathy for adoptees. I was just kind of ignorant about it. It wasn't something I spent a lot of time thinking about before. And yeah, but I guess you take for granted, right? That like you're going to have a picture with your mom holding you when you're a little baby and your dad right there too. And
Yep.
not everybody gets that.
Yep. I mean, and to Corey's previous point, I think I'll always be processing that because my mother and dad, I lost them both before I was 17, and finding this biological family, because I'm probably a ridiculous optimist, I thought, oh, I'm going to get to meet these people and I'll stick them together and we can all be in a photo. That is not going to happen. And, I was delusional about that. And would it mean a lot to me to have that? Of course. But, it's been over 7 years. It's not going to happen. My mother still hasn't spoken to me, all of that. And, you take, like Corey said, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. And I'm grasping to those positive moments.
Yeah, it's that radical acceptance. It just is what it is.
Yep.
And it could change, but I think sometimes hanging on to the hope in certain situations caused me a lot of pain. So it's just better to say, this is what it is now, and it's just the facts, and we got to work through that.
Yeah.
So when we started our second podcast last year, we kicked it off with, let's have the same last question for each episode, which we did not do with Family Twist. Our podcast is Horror Heals. Just I'm mentioning it because we've already had a crossover episode, and I feel like there are probably a lot of adoptees and donor conceived people and NPEs who find solace in watching horror movies. So if you fall in the category, reach out. But we wanted to come up with a last question for Family Twist, and I think we sort of hit upon it. And we're big into music in the house. Like as soon as we hang up with you, like the music will be back on. So when you're kind of going through the thick of it, is there a song or an artist that you lean on to kind of help you get through that moment?
Oh, I don't know why this question made me emotional. I actually have a whole playlist for DNA surprises, which I'm happy to share with you.
Oh, that's
you can
cool.
share with your listeners. Kind of, it's like a I guess, indie alt is the theme of it. I said I need to do like an R&B hip hop version as well to get me through. But there's a song by a group called the Mountain Goats. Yeah, it's called Up the Wolves by the Mountain Goats. And the first lyric is, there's bound to be some ghosts at the back of your closet, no matter where you live. But it's ultimately like that things will get better. And it has ties to like mother. And so thematically, the song really resonates. And there's always like the Mountain Goats always have a little bit of this sadness to them, which I love in music because it makes me feel feelings. Yeah. But there's also this optimism. And I feel like that really is the theme of the DNA surprise experience. So that's probably the one song I would say I most identify with throughout this.
Cool. Well, you've definitely got to share the R&B hip hop playlist with us because we're big into 70s, 80s, and 90s R&B hip hop, funk, disco.
Yeah. Okay. I will work on it. That's going to be my summer project.
We love it. Well, we really appreciate what you do with your podcasts. I know we're on similar missions, but I love that there's not, and I felt this right away when we met last year, there's not this sense of like competition or anything like that. It's like we're all, like we share guests and, everything else. So yeah, I mean, whatever we can do to help align with your message and spread information about your podcast too, we're happy to do it because the more resources out there, the better.
Oh, well, thank you. And same to you. When we met in person, there's no competition. And I'm a true believer that all boats rise. Rising tide lifts all boats. And, there are so many people that this experience affects. My show might not actually be for everyone. They may prefer to listen to Kendall and Corey, or maybe they want to listen to both. But everybody has to find what works for them and what resonates for them. As long as people who are having this experience are finding support and more people are becoming aware that this experience even happens, mission complete, right? So. And same to you. However I can support you all.
Thank you.
And I imagine this is the same for you, but I just feel really strongly about responding to every message that reaches out because, one, I want people to feel heard. And if they got a great story, I want them to be on the podcast. Yeah. But even if not, even if they aren't comfortable with that, I just want them to be heard and for us to respond to everyone. Just thank you for listening and understand what you're going through and et cetera.
Yeah. Or, sometimes if one slips through and then I'm going through my email and trying to respond and I find one, please, if anyone's listening, I am not purposely not responding to you. Email me again. I will respond because these are delicate situations. And the fact that people trust us with their stories is an honor.
It really is. Yeah. We have so much appreciation for the guests and we feel like we've made friends through the guests as well, which is awesome. Like not easy to do at a certain age. So it's been fantastic. We're part of a podcast group in New England and so all these community doors that keep opening are amazing. We get the positivity out of it too, though. I love hearing stories like yours. When I get goosebumps and chills and all the happies and all that, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on with us, Alexis. And looking forward, I'm hoping we'll see you next year at Summit.
I will absolutely be there. Thank you so much for having me.
Alexis, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story so openly. Your perspective, your honesty, and your commitment to creating space for others in this community is so valuable, especially right now when so many people are wrestling with identity, family, and even their place in society. What you said about healing out loud really resonates with us. That's why we do this work, not just for ourselves, but for others who might not be ready or able to share their story just yet. We know DNA Surprises has been a lifeline for so many, and we hope this conversation reaches people who need it. To all our listeners, thank you as always for being here. If this conversation struck a chord with you, please check out DNA Surprises, connect with others, and remember, you are not alone. Until next time on Family Twist, take care, and remember, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.